Yeah, so I was homeschooled by church clowns.
You were literally inside of Ripley's bio-mech suit.
Put me in a room with two actors, and there's a slimy demon monster coming from the ceiling. Like, I can make that work.
It's one of my favorite things about you. Hey everyone, Drew from Moonshine Post coming to you from a vibrant city of Atlanta. At Moonshine, we're all about storytelling, collaboration, bringing visions to life, whether it's for the creative agencies, the big studios, or passionate indies. So come tell your story with us. On today's show, we have writer and director, production designer, and master puppeteer Raymond Carr. You may know him from his work on shows like LazyTown, Splashing Bubbles, or from his filmography of award-winning short films. He's joined me for an enlightening conversation about his life and career and pursuit of craft. So let's just jump right in the show.
Is this an explicit podcast?
We can say what we want. We'll
All
just
right,
leave it
fuck
later.
Yeah.
Raymond, I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm actually thrilled that you're here. Are you aware that you may have some kind of genetic predisposition to not giving a fuck about creating things nonstop? Ever since I met you, I have never known you to not be making something all the time. It's beyond just being like constantly educating yourself. You're like, I need to go try this, or I am fascinated by this, or I want this skill, or I want to try this new medium. And that was inspiring from day one. So did something happen to you? Like, did you, what?
I was severely dropped on my head as a child. No, I mean, okay, there are several reasons why that is. One, I'm really bad with money and have no concept of it, really. So I just am able to just like do things regardless of how I'm going to make the money back or what tomorrow holds. Two, I grew up in a household of creative people, even though they wouldn't call themselves artists. And my mother particularly is an amazing woman, but she's self-described flighty in a certain way. So there wasn't a whole lot of like, I guess, creative stability. It was always just jumping from different thing to different thing. And so that kind of created my, artistic ADD, if you will. And then I think ultimately it's just I get bored with things. And then also when I first started making art and first started like getting into art, I discovered that I was into the weird shit. And like there wasn't enough weird stuff that was my particular brand of weird stuff to like make me happy or satisfy me. So I just realized I had to start making my own weird stuff.
Well, if this creative ADD really goes back to the super weird origin story. So we don't have to do the whole life story, but it is a very unique upbringing.
So I've been told.
And you're going to tell it again. Because there's a lot of moving and shaking and creating things on the road.
Yeah, so I was homeschooled by church clowns. You're just beating around the bush. My parents were clowns, and I was homeschooled, and we traveled the country performing for churches around America, mostly in the Bible Belt. At the height of it, we were performing about 200 times a year, and based in Southern California, LA County, and then moved out to Atlanta when I was just turned 18, so in the middle of my senior year in high school, which was not fun. Yeah, I mean, my parents did clowning and skits and songs and stuff for mega churches. The church I grew up in had 14,000 members in it. And so we would be performing in front of hundreds of kids a week, all, faith-based, Bible-centric stuff about, don't do drugs and don't be a sinner and, lust is bad and you're going to go to hell for having a boner kind of stuff. My brother and I would do puppets in the background because we didn't want people to see us dancing around in these costumes or worse yet be clowns. And honestly, we didn't have to. Like it became a creative outlet just as the nature of creativity always is. And it became addictive because that was just a fun thing to do. We were kind of more like a vaudevillian troupe where we had like sketches and skits and songs and stuff, but it was never really well choreographed or written out, or we were all just kind of shooting from the hip. Like we'd have a legal pad. My mom would have a legal pad of just like, this is what we're doing, and like write one or two words for the beat, and each one of them lasted 2, 3, 5 minutes. And that we just all knew that Fire Dog, we knew what that skit was. We knew ties and old fins. We knew what that was. We knew all these different words that were going to lead into these sketches and everything like that. That was my first foray into creativity, really. It's always under the guise of like, we got to tell people about Jesus so they won't go to hell, which I am not religious anymore, but like when you're in it, like that's real. Like,
and you're performing in front of people that want to see you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we also made money. Like, this was my job when I was a teenager. Like, that was how I made money, and my parents made money too. So, yeah.
But the origin story is, please, dear God, I don't want to be seen in front of all of these kids, and I don't want to talk.
Yeah. No, I was a borderline agoraphobic coming up. Like, I would have like panic attacks going to the grocery store with my mom. Like,
but you could perform in front of mega churches?
Yeah. It was because like I wasn't seen. Like I joke that puppetry is theater for the timid. So I would literally be like, we would have like a PVC pipe puppet stage that was covered in like velour fabric, and I would just sit behind the puppet stage like for the entire 3-hour service, you know. And like my brother and I, we would just be like playing around or like reading comic books or just like not paying attention, whatever. And then after the show, we would wait for everybody to clear out, and then I'd get up and like help pack up, and like no one was the wiser. But yeah, no, when I moved out here, I started, you know, it was obviously a very emo kid at that point because I left my friends, the little friends that I did have, and I discovered the Center for Puppetry Arts, which was a big game changer. Because we moved from Santa Monica, California to Union City, Georgia. And if you've never heard of Union City, Georgia, there's a reason. It's like, yeah, it's almost not even worth finishing the sentence in how small it is. So it was a big change. So I discovered the Center for Puppetry Arts, which for your listeners is the country's largest puppetry theater and museum. It's also one of the largest theaters in Atlanta, and one of the highest paying theaters for like performers too. So it's a really good run. A lot of professional actors in Atlanta have gone through the center over the years, just because it's a good job. And yeah, it's a multi-million-dollar facility, and I just became obsessed with it. Like my brother and I, we did like volunteer there, and then I interned there, had my first job there. I met some professional artists who kind of took me under their wing and was like, it's okay, basically.
What was it, the puppetry on the way, like where you realize, oh, that's the juice, like this is the problem solving, that's the dopamine hit that I want to explore, it's puppets?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think that it was, I wouldn't necessarily say it is puppets. I think it was, in hindsight, it was the idea of being creative, just being creative anyway. I couldn't draw, I couldn't act. I wasn't going to be in front of people and act anyway. I couldn't write. I still am a very slow writer and slow reader even. Blame my homeschooling. So this was this thing that was kind of a default where I could, and I had a little bit of skill in this and how I've been raised. So I was already years ahead of most of my peers. Even at the Center for Puppetry Arts, even though it wasn't nearly as refined as the stuff they were doing there. So I had a little bit of a leg up in just like basic how to translate a character's movement and emotion through your hands or through an object and all that kind of stuff. It was mostly just the fact that I wanted to be a part of this journey of telling stories. I wanted to be one of those people. In the ego context, it's also like, oh, that's a cool thing, and people keep telling you you're doing cool stuff, and then as a kid, you think that that's a great feeling that people think that you're cool and different. And it's like, all right, I'm just going to keep doing that. Even now, I'm probably only still doing this because people keep saying that I'm different.
I still think you're cool.
Yeah. See, look at that. If people stop telling me I'm cool, then I'm probably going to do anything else.
Center for Puppetry Arts.
Right.
That's obviously, you already know that this is the juice. Mm-hmm. This is how I can tell my stories. But there's got to be a break that you get.
Right. When I first got there, I was 17. Yeah, I was 17. And I was really fortunate enough to meet some great artists, the guy named Bobby Box, who became my mentor and is responsible for just about every major job I had in my early years. And he pretty quickly, because we were just like literally sitting in the employee hallway stuffing envelopes that would go out to donors and stuff like that. And just as volunteers, because we just didn't have anywhere else to go. He was like, oh, you should try and do this thing, Experimental Puppetry Theater, XPT, which is this grant-based program where they'll give you submit a story idea, and then they give you money and resources to create the idea, and then they have a showcase. So like every year, it's basically like a week and a half of performances that's kind of like short-form theater pieces, all puppetry related. So I had an idea for a story that was based on my best friend's at the time's just a short story she wrote in high school that almost got her kicked out of our homeschool group that I thought was really, really funny. And so I turned that into a puppet show, and that went over really well. And I was like, okay, that's the feeling I want to do.
Is that what you took to XPT?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called Baby Says Eat Me. It was about it's about an infant child who was the cutest child in the world and suddenly became jealous of the fact that people loved food more than it. And so it taught itself to say, eat me. And so everybody would come up to it, he would just say, eat me. And everybody just thought it was weird or cute. And then finally, but he really wanted people to eat him because he thought that if people ate him, then they would know how delicious he was. He was convinced that he was delicious if he was cute. And so it ends up becoming this thing where he tries to cook himself, and it ends like his father is like trying to figure out what's happening here, and his father's going down this spiral of like insanity and tries to dope him up and gives him all these pills and stuff like that. It ends with the kid eating himself.
All told through the magic of puppetry.
Yes. And this was a short story that my best friend had written at our Christian homeschool group that everybody was very disturbed by. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And nobody else did. So yeah, that was like, I did that when I was 17.
So you went for it.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And at that same show, you met some folks that would pull you in and change the course of your life.
Yeah.
And then would inevitably force you to change the course of my It's true.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, no, that's where I met. It was either the first year or second year. I can't really remember, but because I did XPT like consistently after that, like every year as much as I could. Because also it was like I didn't really know anybody in Georgia, so except out of my church, and I was already starting to decide that this church thing isn't as weird as I am and as I want to be, and these cool artists are like more my speed. So I was already moving away from like that space, and so XPT was like the highlight of my year. Like that's where I met all the like just hanging out backstage with all these artists who were inevitably older than me, and just feeding off of that. And that's where I met David Bruckner and Jacob Gentry. Who were at the time had just graduated college, and they were helping one of their college friends, Tim Sweeney, out with his XPT, and they had like a film segment in their live piece and everything. So they shot a little short film that was accompanying. I think they actually performed in it too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did some minor performance roles.
Little baby filmmakers. Little baby puppeteer Raymond.
Exactly. And I just thought they were the coolest guys ever because like they were smoking and wearing leather jackets and like
driving fast cars.
Yeah, pretty much.
But they got you involved in a program, a club, an artist group that really accelerated, the evolution of you becoming and finding your voice. That inevitably you would. It's a cult that you and I both joined. No, I mean, sorry.
A little bit.
No, but I mean that you met these guys, and obviously these guys. I've loved making movies with them myself and TV shows, but they pull you in and y'all form a group. I actually don't know. There's something special brewing in Atlanta that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, everyone is now doing their own little thing, but this was a magic moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that there is something about the fact that it was of the era of when DV, digital video, first became a thing.
And pre-tax credit.
Yes, pre-tax credit. So we're talking like '05, '06. Because I ended up getting a job that took me to Iceland, working on a Nickelodeon show called LazyTown.
All right, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, we're gonna get all right. So yeah, this group is called Dailies, and it was started by, I believe, Dave Bruckner, Jacob Gentry, and a handful of other folks through this theater group called Push Push Theater with Tim Haberger. So the way that I got involved was I ended up doing a show that a friend of mine from the center was producing, and it was like a live puppetry theater. It was the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was done with puppets. And he asked me to stage manage it, and it was at Push Push. And one of my good friends, Zoe Cooper, who I just met, like showed me how to run the soundboard and was like, hey, you should check out this thing, Dailies. They're doing cool stuff. Because at this point, I was planning on moving into theater, but I ended up, I was going to Georgia State, and they had just canceled the theater program. And also I realized that everybody else that I was working with at the center had like master's degrees in theater and everything. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't. All I want to do is like this puppet stuff. So maybe I shouldn't get a master's in theater if my coworkers have the same degree. So I ended up switching to film because I had always been in love with film. Like I'm a VHS kid where we would make short films on our VHS tapes and all that kind of stuff. And my dad actually would give us, like, he bought us a small camera and was like, when I get home from work, I want to see a film you guys made. So I'd always had an eye and a desire for, the film world. And in fact, like when I was younger, like I didn't necessarily idolize like Jim Henson or the Muppets or Sesame Street. I don't think I was fully aware of it as much as, one can be now. I think I was way more interested in like the creature effects from, Star Wars and the Gremlins and, all of these in the child of the 80s, all these like really cool creature effects and like realizing that there's people operating them and like watching any kind of behind the scenes videos and all that kind of stuff. That was really what I was into. So I ended up going to state, switched my major to film. And then that's when I started doing stuff at Push Push. They told me about Dailies project. The special thing about Dailies was the mentality of it all, because it was this group where the mantra was, it's a safe place to fail. There you go. Yeah, and that said everything. We were all just like trying to make cool stuff and push ourselves to make cool stuff. We would always have a challenge. So it was basically an incubator for short films. So there would be some sort of theme or challenge, like everybody makes a fight scene, or we're going to tell a fairy tale, or there's like a whole thing with Dogma 95, which was...
That's where I came in.
That's right. Yeah. So Dogma, which was a thing for a film where it was like very low-key technology, no all natural lighting. So when you had these challenges, whoever was making those challenges had to come up with criteria for those challenges, rules for those challenges. And so those rules really helped define what the stories were. And so you'd start with the script, and somebody would submit a script, and we'd all sit around and read it and give notes and critique it and tear it apart. And then, we'd pull our resources to everybody worked on everybody's film, and then you screen the short film. I mean, the rough cut rather, and everybody would tear that apart too and build it back up. And then we'd have a big screening where the cast and crew and friends and everything would come and watch these films. And 90% of them were not great. But a handful of them ended up being some cool stuff, and all of them were very educational for us. So yeah, it was a real special place.
I guess obviously at that time, I had no idea who I was talking to.
Right.
The apprentice turned solid puppeteer of LazyTown, but the only black man of Iceland, or was it one of two?
It was I went like months without seeing another black person.
I remember you telling me that, saying I was just the self-proclaimed guy, but really, I don't think I actually saw anybody.
There was a whole thing.
But you went to Iceland before we met at Georgia State.
Yeah.
And you you were constantly trying to finish school. And I was in the same boat. I think that was my third college at that point.
Oh, wow. Really?
And so you and I are both these struggling wannabe students, but still jumping out of class to go make stuff. You went to Iceland. You got an apprenticeship for LazyTown.
Right.
But that's really where, talking about the juice, like you did it in a real capacity.
Yeah. Before LazyTown, I was just getting my core classes out. I was kind of meandering around. Like I had a really hardcore imposter syndrome. Or the thing about like being homeschooled is that you are constantly thinking that there's a bunch of stuff that you don't know because everybody else who went to a public school or private school, like it just has a whole different culture and you're just the alien. So I was always thinking that like I can't take the upper level film courses because I'm going to be behind or I'm just going to be weird and not know what the normal thing to do is. So I didn't take any of those major courses before I went to Iceland. I was basically taking the core and like academic stuff. And then once I did the whole thing in Iceland and came back, it was about a year later. And I thought I was going to be going back for a second season, but that didn't end up happening. So I kind of had like the first like true like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I had all these plans and now they are out the window. So I got to.
Well, that's what I was wondering is like LazyTown was a big deal. And then you came back and then you went back to school.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, in LazyTown, you did the apprenticeship, but then you got bumped up and it was a longer duration and you end up becoming actual.
Yeah. Core crew, like base core class. Yeah. I was cast rather. I was, well, I was, this is getting into the weeds, but
it's worth it.
Children's television, if there's puppet stuff, Sesame Street, whatever, you have your principal characters, and then you have an ensemble of assistants, and those assistants can do anything from doing what they call live hands. We're doing the hands that are for like Cookie Monster. He has hands that gets cookies and stuff like that, or operating the rods for the puppet, or anything like a background character or a little butterfly flying through the screen, all that kind of stuff. That's all the stuff assistant puppeteers do. And occasionally they get bumped up to being main cast. So I would start off as an apprentice, which was basically an internship. And then I got bumped up to an assistant. It was a pretty special experience and paid more than I'd ever made in my life. So I came back into town, still living off that juice, and found that it was very hard to get back into like my church life and like my normal life and all that kind of stuff. All of my friends were from the church and everything. So once I started moving away from there, I kind of had no friends again. So that's when I discovered dailies and push and was like, okay, I'm going to make these people my new friends.
You're community seeking, yes. Basically. Yeah, I had to replace it. But you didn't finish school.
Correct.
And I'm sorry to tell that for you, but you just said, no, I got to go do something. And we were in this dailies club, but then you transacted and became a puppeteer pro.
You know, it's funny because I think that a lot of people try and they ask me which one am I, and that's just the nature of the way we think.
I know which one you are.
Yeah, like to categorize. But like, I truly feel that I am equal parts filmmaker and puppeteer. Like, and I, now that I've been able to direct some stuff for, high-end children's television, I do feel like my strongest point is being a director who has creature effects or puppetry or any kind of visual effects in his work. And that's also one of the reasons why I stuck with puppetry too, is that when we were making our own indie films, if you add a puppet or a creature in your project, it's already going to set it apart from the other random thing with like two people in their living room talking about their, relationship problems, which is the trope of like most short films. So
all those kids in our class.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, what's going to set me apart? And I was like, I'm going to try and integrate puppetry into this film stuff.
I'm a weirdo with a weird background. Yeah. I'm the weird guy that does puppets.
And I knew enough artists who could like build stuff and who were puppeteers who didn't have any connection to the film world. And I knew enough filmmakers who didn't have any connection to anything other than, just actors. So I became this conduit between these two groups of people that empowered me to make my movies slightly more interesting than others.
Yeah, I mean, I watched you grow in that environment. I grew immensely too. I obviously was the incubator that would then form Moonshine
Right.
after a couple of Sundance movements. But realizing, oh wait, I can get paid for this. Told you, Mom. But like, there's this moment where okay, we're past that program. We have our film club, but then you literally said, "I'm going to go climb into this mech warrior in the shape of a dinosaur and roam across North America on this exhibit called
Walking with Dinosaurs, the Arena Spectacular.
Wow." And you were gone for like 2 years. And I remember thinking, I'll never see Raymond again. This kid's really made it. He's really all about them robot puppets. And obviously I got to hang out with you again, but I moved on too. I switched I moved across
the
country.
show, right?
No.
You never saw the show?
No.
Shit, why not?
I moved across the country. I moved to a different country.
That's right. You
yeah.
went to that's when you went to Germany.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
So
right.
it's just like, oh, I'll never see him. I'll see you guys.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I know this is epic. I was watching it online. You were
Yeah.
very active on social media. So but you have to explain this to the podcast. You were literally inside of Ripley's bio mech suit from Aliens 2 fighting.
The show's called Walking with Dinosaurs, the Arena Spectacular, and it was an arena show. So we played Madison Square Garden, the Staples Center, like the big basketball arenas of every major city in North America, Mexico, and Canada. And it was, at the time, the fourth largest touring show in the world. It was like Springsteen, U2, one other company, and us. And we traveled with 75 crew members, 25 semi-trucks, and we're in a new city every week, all with life-sized animatronic dinosaurs. So I was the head of puppetry on that for about 2 years. And so I operated the Brachiosaurus, which was about 40 feet tall, Torosaurus, which is kind of like a Triceratops, and a Stegosaurus. And like I said, they played on these big arenas. So, we would have 15, 20,000 people in these arenas just like losing their mind when the T-Rex came out and like roared in their faces.
I watched all the videos you would send, and it was incredible.
Yeah. No, it's truly one of my one of the highlights of my career. But I did 800 shows. I did it for 2 years, and by that time, when I left Atlanta to be on that show, I think I was probably in a place where I was like, all right, what am I doing? I'm just basically hanging out with my friends, but I didn't really see a clear path for filmmaking. Especially this is, again, pre-tax incentive. And I don't think people really appreciate how different Atlanta was before that. Like the idea of becoming a professional filmmaker or even just like a crew person, like, and having consistent work as a crew person was just an anomaly. It was so much harder than it is now. So when I left, I was like, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay in Atlanta, honestly. I remember that. Yeah, I was going to maybe just figure it out, go back to California or whatever. But we traveled for 2 years and I got to see every major city. And the thing I learned about that was that like the idea of a city in and of itself does not bring you happiness or does not bring you creative motivation. Like it really has everything to do with community. Yes. And so I realized how special having a community was.
Back to like this perpetual making of stuff. You really honed in the hours to become this craftsman, and you learn these skills of puppetry, which progresses, adds to your flair as a creative. Right. That's this initial juice, but you were also just this straight up visual storyteller in film. So like I would watch you come home or even before that, bang out 3 short films in a row just to feel something.
Just to feel anything.
Yeah, like I don't have emotion, so I'm going to go put it on the screen. But there's a moment where you realize not only can I control these puppets masterfully, but I can now make TV about puppets.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot that went on between that, but for the most part, basically, I at this point, was working 10 years in the children's entertainment world, either in theater or
even with dinosaurs in the middle.
Yeah, like doing the math in real time. But yeah, so I get off dinosaurs, and then the film industry is picking up here. I started basically doing production design based on some of the short films that I did. Once I started doing that, I had a handful of opportunities that empowered me to basically take my voice into directing children's television. And at this point, I kind of had a reel, I had a website. The thing that I've excelled at at certain times in my life is being able to put my work out there and remind people that I'm doing things.
Shamelessly.
Yeah. I mean,
It's one of my favorite things about you.
it's really a fine line because you don't want to seem obnoxious or just annoying, but I think it's important for people to realize that you are doing stuff and you're capable of doing stuff. So as long as people had it in the back of their mind, Raymond is a weird creative who does stuff, like that led to other work.
The funny thing about you was that you were still making the side hustle movies on the side. You're always acquiring these new skills, perpetually educating yourself. And so you would always have this one legit thing to show off, like, hey, look, I'm the guy who did dinosaurs, or hey, look, I production designed this real TV show. Look at my weird shit.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you weren't just hey, I'm Raymond, I'm the guy who makes all the weird shit. Don't hang out with me.
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, I make real things, and on the side I make some cool stuff.
Yeah, I think that's been a really interesting journey for my career because I think that my creative ADD has benefited me and also has honestly hurt me in certain ways just because I have a pretty large variety of like quote unquote cool shit that I can point to. But that only goes so far because if you are a guy who does horror, and you want the big horror job, people still have a tendency to pigeonhole you and they want to know that you can do the genre very well. And to be fair, there are some specific differences between, children's television and horror adult feature films. The idea of the tension and fear and scares and all these sorts of things. There are holdovers and connections between the two, but not everybody can see that. I see them as being very similar. But it's hard to articulate that as to, yeah, I've done this weird kid show, but also I could make a cool horror movie thing. And that's kind of moving forward with trying to get professional directing jobs and everything. I have equal love for the weird puppet stuff for kids and also the weird horror stuff for adults and sci-fi and fantasy and all that kind of stuff. So at the same time, that's also why I really admire Jim Henson, because he never wanted to be a children's entertainer. He actively pushed away from that. He almost didn't take Sesame Street because he thought he was going to get pigeonholed as a children's entertainer. I mean, if you look at his old stuff, he started in public or local television back. This is also at the birth of television, so a lot of what he did is not fully applicable for anybody now, other than his tenacious desire to be a real artist. But he was doing fun stuff with puppets, and he got into the advertisement world where he basically made these commercials for coffee companies and detergent and microwavable food and all that kind of stuff. And all of them had that wacky Muppet mentality where something would explode, somebody would be eaten by a monster, something would happen that was just off the wall. So he built a brand for himself that was just fun and weird. At the same time, he was trying to pitch the Muppet Show. And so he eventually had to take the Muppet Show to the UK because those were the only people that were interested. And that's where the Muppet Show happened, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. So anyway, all that to say, he eventually walked away from the Muppet Show. They were at the height of their thing, and he just was like, I'm done. After 5 seasons. And that's when he made The Dark Crystal, which was a flop. And then from there, he made The Labyrinth, which was also kind of a flop, and did his other stuff. So that was kind of his mentality. It was like, I'm just going to keep doing shit.
Well, I mean, you kept doing shit and then making these films, obviously not in the direction of children's television. These films were for you, but you were heavily in this career path inspired by Henson, keep making fun and weird stuff. You then, pursuant to that path, you actually did go take Henson workshops and work with the company.
Yeah.
And that gave you a foray into more performance, again, as I understand it. That was Splash and Bubbles. And you're puppeteering and performing in it. I'm sorry if I don't know the exact terms.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a little tricky. The Splash and Bubbles is a show where the final output is a CG
Mapped to you,
Yeah,
right?
well, it's a CG cartoon, but it's actually all it's analog mapping. So in the way analog digitaling, where it's not mapping to my face. We're doing these characters in real time. I'm voicing the character and everything, but I have basically this animatronic interface. So I have a metallic thing that goes over my hand that basically works as a puppet glove. And it also goes over my individual fingers, so I can do the nuances of the character. This is all CG real time, so I can make the lips curl or make a ooh sound or e sound or basically make the cheeks move and all that kind of stuff, all within my fingertips. And this is more useful for your YouTube audience than your podcast audience. But I would basically do this kind of stuff, and then I could move. I could like twist it this way, and I could move the thumb, and like moving the thumb left would make the tongue move. Or if I twisted it this way, if I twisted my wrist this way, it would make the cheeks, the lips like perk up, like go a ooh sound. If I did this way, it would make an e sound. So you had to like constantly move the mouth in different ways to make the puppet, the digital puppet, basically talk, which is a whole different set of skill set as a puppeteer. And then I had in my left hand, I had a joystick with 6 different toggles attached to my finger. So I could, if I toggled the first one, my pointer finger, that make a blink. The 2 other ones would make my ring finger and my index finger would make the eyes kind of move individually, the brows move individually, and then my pinky finger would make the lower eyebrow move. And then I had a thing covering my thumb that I could rotate around, and that would make the eyeballs move around. And then I had a series of 5 foot pedals that I could program to make it do all kinds of different things too. And then the joystick, obviously moving forward, backwards, left, right, that programmed things in. And then my right hand that had the mouth in it, I had basically a gyroscope over my forearm that I could move that around, and that was programming into different things. So this system was called a Waldo. The Henson Digital Puppetry System is called a Waldo. And this was actually created, one of the last things Jim did before he died in like 1990. So this technology has been around for over 30 years. Yeah. And it's actually the same style of technology that they use for movies like the 90s Ninja Turtles. Oh, and the value of doing it, why do they do this? They basically are doing this because it creates a real-time animated series. So we would have people on the floor, on what we call the volume, with mocap balls on either their suits or the puppet they're operating. For the show I was working with, Splash and Bubbles, they were fish. So they would basically have rod puppets with mocap balls on it. So they would move it around this big 500 square foot mat with motion capture cameras all around it. And there'd be screens all around, and then there'd be virtual cameras around too. So there'd be 3 camera operators on the side moving these cameras through a virtual space, while there's performers on the volumes moving these mocap characters around. And then while there's a bank of 6 performers using the Waldo's, the Henson Digital Puppetry System, operating the faces of these characters, doing the lines in real time. So we were basically able to produce a 15-minute episode a day.
Well, this is the recurrent theme is I'm hanging out with Raymond, and then Raymond goes, I just made enough money from doing this thing that I dabbled in, and now I'm going to run out and learn something else. But this time it's Henson, and Henson is, correct me if I'm wrong, but that inevitably, if that's what you're going to do, like that's the top.
In my mind it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the new challenge of I have puppetry skills. I've been doing this my whole life. Yeah. It's connected to my voice and my filmmaking. I have to do this.
Yeah.
So see you later, other career move, you disappear. You're banking on this. You're compelled towards Henson.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I just had to do it, especially once they gave me the opportunity. It was. So yeah, once I got on Splash and Bubbles, I ended up staying out in LA for the better part of a year. Again, I thought my life was going to be different, and then, as is the nature, I always call it the myth of making it. Like, there's no such thing as making it. You're always going to have another hurdle, another thing that you want more, or it's just not going to be as consistent. I mean, you always hear about this. Even like Francis Ford Coppola struggled to get his most recent movie made, and like all these other amazing artists and filmmakers, they all still have to like hustle to get shit done. So if there's any kind of like things that I learn and relearn, is that like you can't rest on your laurels, because there is no such thing as like smooth sailing from here on out, unless you truly become like more wealthy than God. Then, well, that's a whole nother set of problems.
Well, that's the genetic deficiency I'm talking about. You've made it 10 times, Raymond.
Well,
yet you have to keep making it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I make it, but then I'm not like set for life. If it wasn't for money, then my life and trajectory would be a lot different if I hadn't. But like, I am constantly having to be like, okay, I did this thing that was really cool, but now I have to think about the next thing, or maybe can I take the risk of not making any money for X amount of weeks, months to pursue this thing? Now I'm married. Thankfully, my wife is along for the ride. Yeah, but it's tricky, I don't want to pretend like it's just a no-brainer or anything like that. Like, even the stuff I want to do now, the projects that I'm really passionate about, it's not any easier. If not, it's harder to get it done, just because you have all of these other life hurdles that you have to contend with. So,
sure, but it doesn't seem to stop you. And this is where I have to give you the praise, because you have the most circuitous, ass backwards way of path to directing. But I have to give you this one plug where you shamelessly mastered the art of talking and promoting the weird things on the side while doing the legit things. And you continually educate yourself, but then you're also educating others. So now you're on the flip side. And just by talking about yourself, there is a movie that, after all this of making it, I go and I do Splash and Bubbles. Okay, now we got to make another movie. So you want to do this is Joyriders.
Yeah.
Which we get to work on.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. So I love that movie. I love it since the pitch. I don't love all your movies, but I love the process of making them with you. It's like one of the best ways to spend time with you. But that movie from concept, from script to screen was awesome. I know that movie also gets you noticed, which is the cool thing, and then leads you to the directing that we're getting towards. But the passion of like, I've got to make it again.
Yeah.
But this one, like, I mean, that obviously leads to the next opportunity, but I have to know, like, what is the passion behind making that project? I love it. I love working on it. My whole team. You just met the colorist in the hallway. It's like, I got to go meet Raymond. I love this movie. How does that happen after Splash and Bubbles?
So there was a gap there where I started working on another show called Moon and Me, which was from the creators of Teletubbies. That one had that was actually incredibly insightful, because it used miniature puppets, and every shot was a motion control shot. Every shot was a plate shot. Every shot was a visual effects shot, even though we're doing everything practically, just because there was so many layers to it. So that reinforced a lot of my knowledge about visual effects and motion control and all that kind of stuff. So after I worked on that. It was a long series too. So
we were on it. We did sound.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember seeing all 6 versions of the same puppet that you had, because you were a puppet captain.
Yeah, basically, I met a new team of artists, and I had this idea like bubbling around in my head for a couple of years, actually. It's called Joyriders. It's about 3 kids from the inner city who find an alien spaceship and accidentally download the alien's consciousness and take the spaceship on a joyride through Atlanta. I came back into Atlanta and with this idea for Joyriders, still obsessed with it, and I ended up being able to narrow it down as to how it could be achievable, knowing that I wanted to do most of it with practical effects. And also because I've been working on Moon and Me, I had connections with people with motion control cameras. That's when I was like, okay, I have all the pieces in place to actually make something epic. I'm going to just shoot my shot for this, even if it's like the last film I do.
The special effects is what led to another opportunity. I mean, people are inspired by what you did for that film. And you brag about it like you do, which I love about you. And someone shows up. And lo and behold, this is like Raymond's 5th break. So unpack that.
It's true.
You put out on Facebook, hey, I'm going to go talk about this cool thing I made.
Yeah.
Look at me, how important I am.
I
dare you to show up.
My exact words, I believe.
Dare you show up and bring something from my ego.
No, I got very lucky where the movie was making the festival rounds, and an executive producer that I met while working in LA was the only person who showed up that I actually who was based on like the social media posts. I was like, "What are you doing here?" And she was like, "Oh, I saw you posting on Facebook," and I was like, "That's cool." So she came in and saw the film, and then I was teaching a workshop about how we achieve some of our practical effects. She sat in on that, and she thought that was cool. And so then after that, she basically got me into interview for a job to direct children's television for Apple TV for a new show that they have coming out, which
you probably can't talk about.
I'm like,
run the scenario. They're probably listening.
You know what? This is what's going to happen. I'm going to...
You don't have to
All
say
right, I won't say it. You can edit this down to make it look like I'm not being as shady as I am. But basically...
No, we'll look at the camera and say right now you can't say it because you're a working professional.
It's for Apple TV. It's a new children's television show that's going to be really cool. I'm very proud of what we did. That was one of those shows that I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing, because it had all the moving parts. It had a lot of visual effects, a lot of puppets and costumes, stuff like that. And I think the difference between independent filmmaking and professional filmmaking, when you're an indie filmmaker, you always feel like the other side is doing something a lot different than the way that you're doing it. Like, just whatever that is, you feel like the gatekeepers are holding the magic back. And if only you knew exactly how Hollywood does a standard shot list, or how Hollywood does a standard this or standard that. And it's like, no, everybody does their shot list differently. Yeah, there's certain ways you do certain things, but there's still like a lot of objectiveness in how we create content. So I basically applied my skills to that.
Well, no, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but like you're getting called to the big leagues. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you've been in the big leagues in other areas so far. Yeah. And you're directing. And you and I have talked about this before on a personal note, is what do they know that I don't know?
Right.
What did you find out?
I mean, look, I'm not saying that there wasn't anything, but it wasn't as far from what I was doing to begin already. That we've been doing for years.
Well, you found out you were a director.
Yeah.
You realized this.
Yeah. I mean, that was a reassurance and everything. And like the thing is, like it's gonna happen every time I walk on set until it stops, which I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I here? Is everybody gonna figure me out? All that kind of imposter syndrome stuff.
You like,
yeah.
What am I doing, Mr. Director Carr?
Exactly. Like even just being able, like working in the art department for so many years, and then as a director, I walk into the art department with an idea or checking in on a prop or what have you. And I realized that everybody's butt just clenched because the director walked in unexpectedly. And I'm really like, sorry, this isn't an ambush. I just had a question. Everybody don't be afraid. Because I know what that felt like.
I was going to say, you've been on the receiving end.
Yeah, exactly. I know what that feels like. And I don't want to be an asshole to anybody and like scare them. The thing that you learn is what not to do a lot of times, and as you are an independent filmmaker and you try and overcome that and try not to do that, and there's still never enough money or resources for the projects that you want to do, still never enough time, which is always the big X factor. So I was very prepared. I had to be prepared for the project, and from what I've been told, I did a pretty good job. So I think that that's really where I have landed, is like I am at my best when I am blending some sort of practical creature effect, puppet effect, and with filmmaking. Those are the two things that, like, that's my Venn diagram. So put me in a room with a camera with two actors and they're just talking about their feelings. I can do that, but that's not my strong point. Put me in a room with those two actors talking about their feelings and there's a slimy demon monster coming from the ceiling. Like, I can make that work.
Thanks so much. I admire you. I'm honored to call you my friend. Can you tell us who Raymond, Sexy Raymond is?
This is trying to make a long story as short as possible. There's a theater in Atlanta called Dad's Garage, and we used to have this thing called Puppet Slams where we would have adult puppetry sketches. One of my mentors and friends gave me the name Raymond Sexy Raymond because they thought that I should be like a R&B pop star. And I should just sing songs called Raymond Sexy Raymond. So I made a puppet slam piece where Raymond Sexy Raymond came out on stage and was brutally murdered. And the whole thing with Raymond Sexy Raymond, he's surrounded by these backup singers who would just pop up and just go, Raymond Sexy Raymond. The whole thing is they would come up at the most inappropriate times as he was being beaten to death or eviscerated. And every year I keep trying to kill off Raymond Sexy Raymond, but he keeps coming back.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Raymond Carr. He's an insanely creative storyteller, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope his relentless drive to create stories is an inspiration to you and your creative endeavors. You can find him on Instagram at The Ninja Puppet and his website, ninjapuppetproductions.com. Until next time, keep sharp, keep friendly, keep creating. Moonshine out.